When I first started in the self-publishing business, I didn't view options of ebooks and audiobooks as just viable options. I was like, who actually gets those things? But over 9 years later, I've come to understand self-publishing could be so much more than any one form of publication, be it ebooks, print books, and audiobooks. But let's face it, audiobook publishing isn't an easy or cheap business to break into, regardless of what some of these online gurus would tell you. So what would you do? And what would I do, more importantly, if I started an audiobook publishing business today? Find out my thoughts and get additional suggestions so you can start publishing your audiobooks ASAP. And of course, I know we're going to be jumping into this podcast, and of course, I'm going to tell you that this has been brought to you in part by the fine folks over at Dibbly Create. Discover Dibbly Create, your ultimate project partner. Get ready for a new era of productivity and collaboration. Introducing Kip. Dibbly Creates cutting-edge AI technology. From brainstorming to generating project outlines, Kip does it all. Collaborate seamlessly with your team in real time, shaping ideas into reality. Personalize your projects with various text styles, formatting options, and layouts. Export effortlessly and work offline so you're never limited by your location. Unleash your creativity with Dibbly Create. Visit my affiliate link at dalelinks.com/DibblyCreate and redefine how you work today. Dibbly Create, where innovation begins. All right, folks. So let's go ahead. Let's get into this whole conversation of publishing audiobooks. I can sit here and I can share all the data about how it has been increasing in popularity and how Spotify has thrown their hat into the ring. And honestly, I think if you're listening to this, you should already know the value of audiobook publishing and why you should have audiobooks. If you don't, go back into any of the previous podcasts I had. Today, I'm just going to kind of talk about what I would do differently, but I think it's important that we lay a little bit of the groundwork and understanding, okay, what do we have to work with and how do we approach this? So let's discuss the very first thing, the cost of publishing audiobooks, because it can cost a significant amount or nothing at all. So let's just start it out. The very first thing is going to be doing it yourself. DIY. It's one of my favorite ways to doing it. Now, if you have the equipment, you'll travel. All right. Good friend William May. William May actually went and did his own audiobook in the comforts of his office using just a simple, small USB microphone. Not bad. And he's actually had a pretty decent amount of sales using that. Now, for something like me, where I've got a number of different pieces of equipment that I can leverage, that's fantastic. Now, if you don't have the equipment, it's going to be a lot for you to have to invest in, especially if you don't have, let's say, $100 to invest in something like this. Now, if you have $100, you can probably find a good USB microphone. That's not a big deal. But even then, when you get the equipment, keep in mind there's still a steep learning curve because you're still going to have to figure out how you're going to dial in the specifications. Are you going to put enough buffer at the beginning, at the end? Is the noise floor going to be low enough? There's going to be a lot of hissing. Are you going to need to get post-production and by way of editing and mastering through like a third-party person? Those are other things you just kind of keep in mind, because just because you have the equipment doesn't necessarily mean that you're just going to all of a sudden have an amazing audiobook, because it's going to take a lot of trial and error. Now, one of the things I would recommend that you do is use the free tool made available through Audiobook Creation Exchange. It's called Audiolab. You can just Google it up, ACX Audiolab. And I've put a link inside the show notes as per usual, so that way you can just jump right on over to that. But when you get done producing a chapter or any type of a segment, feed it through Audiolab and see if it passes their specifications. And they will tell you what you're probably doing wrong with that, or if it's right, it'll just kind of go through. Because when you can meet the very strict guidelines of ACX, then you've got it made. So as soon as you can kind of get all that dialed in, great. That's fantastic. Now, another way that you can do DIY is, I've done this myself, rent a studio. I rented a local studio here over in Hilliard called Amerisound Studios. Highly recommend if you happen to be inside the Columbus, Ohio area, go check out Amerisound Studios. Dan Green, fantastic guy, great to work with. It cost me back at that time in 2020 about $50 per hour to rent the studio. And it took about 6 hours of production time for a 2-hour audiobook. So you can see it's about $300. It's a pretty significant amount. Now, there are also other occasions, though, that you can look into, different ways to get yourself recorded. So for instance, I stumbled over this a while ago. Sound the alarms. You can hear it going off right about now. That up in Orange Township, at least here in Columbus, there's a library, and they actually had this, and this was before the pandemic. I don't know if they still have this, but they had a sound booth there. It was 100% free to utilize. So maybe look inside your local library or even some of your free resources within your community, because there might actually be a sound booth available. Now, with the Orange Township Library, 100% free. All you had to do is just reserve the booth and then you're good to go. Now, what if you have no equipment and you have no money? Consider asking around. I mean, borrow equipment from somebody you know, maybe a friend or a family member. If somebody you know runs a podcast, see if you can hey, can I borrow that for a weekend so I can record my audiobook? Although I don't know if you'll be able to get recorded in a weekend, but either way, asking around and seeing if you can get it. The other way to do it is crowdfunding. Though I will say, historically, I've done a little bit of research. A lot of crowdfunding campaigns, at least over on Kickstarter, they're not very good for audiobook crowdfunding. That's not to say that you can't still at least try, because worst case scenario, what happens if you don't fulfill a crowdfunding campaign with Kickstarter? It hurts your ego, but you're really not, going to be out any other thing other than, hey, a little bit of time and an answer that, well, no one's going to want to crowdfund. But I'd say at least give that a shot. You can also look into other avenues beyond Kickstarter. Of course, there's places like Indiegogo or even something like GoFundMe. I wouldn't recommend that though. All right. So that's understanding, of course, that with the whole crowdfunding stuff, you can always tack this on to any of the options that I'm going to mention next. Now, the very next option to consider is per finished hour. Now, per finished hour means you're going to hire a professional who knows what they're doing, that they know the lay of the land, they know the specifications that needs to be done, they know how to deliver it just right. And per finished hour works that you pay them per finished hour of a narrated audiobook. So for instance, if your book is 2 hours long, you're going to be paying for 2 per finished hour rate. So for instance, in my occasion of this particular book where I talked, it was 2 hours, I'm going to have to pay that person for the PFH for 2 of those things. And so say, for instance, if I hired a narrator and they were $250 per finished hour, my audiobook would have ran me $500 as opposed to the $300 that I was able to spend on something like that. Now, per finished hour seems very expensive when you see it. But if you think about some of the work that is put into the production, you'll start to understand that it's not like they're getting paid $250 per hour. No, because they're having to do a lot of preparation, put together notes, maybe do some research. They're going to also not going to read the book in a perfect one take. No, they're going to have mess ups and mistakes, which means there's going to be more editing. And then, of course, they have to go and master this. Not to mention, in a lot of instances, there are some narrators that will record the audiobook and then they'll send it out to get it edited and mastered. So this is why sometimes there are some per finished hour rates that are considerably more than others. Now, where can you get those narrators? What I would recommend is looking into the ACX marketplace or even Find a Way Voices marketplace. Now, that's Audiobook Creation Exchange. They've got their own marketplace. You can browse there. You can see all of the different narrators out there. You can narrow it down to the specific type of narrator that you want, be it male, female. Do you want to have a specific dialect? Is there a specific language you want to have delivered? Is there, samples that you can kind of review? Think about those type of things when you're looking at either the ACX or Find a Way Voices marketplaces to find your narrator. One of the other ways is through referrals as well. Ask around. Some indie authors will probably be happy to refer you over to their preferred audiobook narrator. And you might end up getting a nice little deal in the process. Who knows? Referrals are always fantastic. And there's also, you could just do a general online search of various websites for narrators. I know there are a ton out there, and my apologies to the narrators that probably pay attention to this podcast, but I honestly have always just stuck to the different marketplaces and referrals primarily for my narrating needs. Now, let's explore the very next option, one of my least favorite options, and that is royalty share. Now, a royalty share is when you go into an agreement with the narrator that you will share a specific amount of revenue of each one of the sales in exchange for the narrator to do the work for you. Essentially, the narrator takes all the risk and you don't really risk anything. But the thing is, though, in perpetuity, you are going to be splitting that revenue with them unless you find a way to buy them out of an agreement. And so here's why I don't like royalty share deals. And just hear me out on this one here. A number of years ago, I'd say it was about 2015 when I went full bullish on audiobook creation exchange. And my coach and mentor at the time was like, yes, go all in. You got to do it. And I was like, I don't have any money. I didn't have any money at the time. And he was like, just do royalty share. It's fantastic. It's only a 7-year deal through ACX. And, you really don't have to worry about anything from that point on. And when the 7 years is up, the audiobook is yours. I literally believed that. No, the 7-year agreement they do through ACX, it can renew yearly after that initial 7 years. But that audiobook, the rights don't just automatically come back to you. No. You have to still split that revenue. And in the event that you want to break that agreement with that narrator, you need to get them to agree to it, of course. And at that point, the two of you approach ACX and say, hey, could you break this agreement? And keep in mind, a narrator is not just going to go, yeah, sure, I did all that work. Let's just go ahead and call it even Steven. No. They're typically going to ask for their per finished hour. And in a lot of instances, what I found out real quick was when a book is doing rather well, they're going to ask for considerably more to break that contract because they know what you stand to gain or lose, and for themselves as well. So it's kind of a really crappy deal. And not to mention, if you do break that agreement, let's say, okay, we pay for the rights. The narrator's like, it's all yours. You can use my voice however you wish to, publish it wherever you want. That's all well and good. But here's the problem. ACX has to take down that audiobook narration, all right? Which means that you lose all algorithmic relevance and you lose all of the reviews that were associated with that. And here's the thing, you have to publish that audiobook like it's brand new. Yeah, that sucks. I really don't like it. This is why I believe ACX's royalty share is absolute total trash at a 50-50 split. It's not good. It's good for the narrator, maybe, if the narrator actually makes some of their money back through any type of earnings. Some narrators take a bath. I ain't gonna lie. This happened a couple times in some of my publications, and I'm kind of embarrassed to admit it. But I went into this royalty share deal thinking, oh, this is the best thing in the world. Now, Findaway Voices has a royalty share program as well, and I think it might be like called Voices Plus or something like that, or Voices Share, something to do with that. But theirs is a little different in that you pay 50% of the per finished hour up front. In exchange, you have an 80-20 split, meaning that you get 80% of the revenue and they take 20% of that. This is a 10-year contract. But you can buy that contract out by paying 100% of the per finished hour. So this means that if that audiobook takes off really, really good and you've made a really good gamble, you can go in and just buy that narrator out. And the nice thing is, unlike ACX, the narrators can't just go and price hike you. That part right there, again, just drives me absolutely crazy. I totally get it. It's a business model. They took a risk. They want their cut. But I don't like the fact that they can just go ahead and jack the rates up. Findaway Voices puts a lid on it. They're like, what's your per finished hour? That's what you're going to get paid. So essentially, in order to actually get the Findaway Voices royalty share program, in order to get the actual rights reverted back to you, you have to pay up to 150% of the per finished hour rate. Crazy, right? So, all right, the narrator takes all the risk here, folks. Just so you know, I don't want any narrators to be putting a hit on my head or anything crazy like that. They take all the risk on some of these revenue share deals. So the rights holder is only tied up by the audiobook rights with this agreement. So this means that when you go into a royalty share deal, you just can't take that willy-nilly anywhere else unless you had made the deal off platform. And I wouldn't recommend unless you actually have some type of a legal binding document, because ACX and Findaway Voices has those documents. So you want to make sure that you have all that stuff dialed in. Again, wouldn't recommend doing it off platform. Of course, there's also the royalty share deals plus the discounted per finished hour. That's even worse. So on ACX, they actually offer to do a lower per finished hour for a higher premium, narrator, and you still do the royalty share. I think that's even worse. Just honestly, you just might as well just go ahead and pay for the thing all up front. And wait for the collective gasp when I suggest this next one. It's an option. Just think about it. Don't shoot the messenger on this one here. AI narration. Yep, I get it. A lot of you are cringing right out your skin. And I totally understand. But the AI narration is actually getting quite good these days. It's actually getting way better than some of these like TikTok videos or YouTube shorts that you're going to end up seeing where it's just like, oh gosh, swipe. It's really getting good. So if you're cash strapped and need some way to generate revenue, AI narration could be at least a temporary option to consider, at least till you come up with the budget to afford a human narrator. Let me share a little bit of a story here of a good friend of mine, Michael Aron. He actually has a channel called Author Level Up, and he's also U.S. ambassador for the Alliance of Independent Authors. Now, Michael is an absolute writing and publishing machine. He just does amazing work. And some of the stuff that he puts out is only relevant to a specific time period or a year, or it needs to be updated frequently. And rather than Michael sitting down and producing all of his audiobooks and just painstakingly going through and editing and listening to it and just trying to get all the specs into play, what he did was get the AI voice narration to do these books that would just only be relevant for another year to 2 years. And this cuts down considerably on the costs. Now, keep in mind that AI narration, you can find some that are free, but you're going to find the better ones are going to be behind a paywall. I'm going to share one of them here with you in my next story here, where I share a good friend of the channel, Nick Thacker. Nick has been a really good friend of mine. He also is the VP of Author Success over Drafted Digital. And in a private conversation, Nick and I actually had chatted about how he has a YouTube channel. He got himself into the YouTube Partner Program by using AI narration on a book that he had. Now, this wasn't a nonfiction book. This was one of his fiction books. And he just decided, throw spaghetti against the wall and see what would kind of come down and come out of it. And lo and behold, it blows up and it gets his channel fully monetized. And here's the funny thing is, it had replicated his voice. He showed me the audiobook. I legitimately thought it was him. I was like, what is this like wizardry that you're doing here? Apparently there is companies out there, or there are companies, and one of them was 11 Labs. Now, 11 Labs is pretty funny in that you can actually get celebrities to narrate your audiobook. For instance, Snoop Dogg is one of them. I'm big fan of Snoop Dogg. I won't lie to you. I would love to have one of my audiobooks narrated by him. But hiring the actual Snoop Dogg and not the AI version of him is probably going to be astronomically high, whereas something through 11 Labs, it's a little bit more affordable. Unfortunately, I don't have their rates off the top of my head here, but I do know they have some type of like a trial of some sort that you can kind of test it out. Now, other options for AI narration you can consider is through Apple or through Google Play Books. Now, previously, you could not be able to publish audiobooks over to the Apple platform or Google Play Books directly. You had to go through another source like, say, Findaway Voices or ACX in order to get to Apple. And it became just, it sucks. But in the last year, Apple and Google Play Books actually put together their own version of AI narration. And I know that Apple's specifically looking for some types of books, so not all authors are going to qualify for something like that, but it's free. It's a free option. If you're distributing your ebook through Apple or Google Play Books, they actually offer that to you. That's one of the greatest ways to go directly to their platform if you're a bit more cash strapped. Now, what I would recommend, read the fine print first if you end up doing this, because there might be some exclusivity type deal where you can only have it over on Apple, or you can only have it over on Google Play Books. You can't take that narration down and put it anywhere else. So there could be some limitations. I highly recommend that you do your due diligence. So where can you publish your audiobooks? Now there's ACX, there's Findaway Voices, Publish Drive, Authors Republic, Audiobooks Unleashed, and I'm going to get back to them in just a second, Shinshi, which is spelled Xinxii, Lantern Audio, which is formerly known as Listen Up Audio. Now, let me backtrack to Audiobooks Unleashed. Now, Audiobooks Unleashed they have a very stringent process. They vet through the people that they will distribute. So, in other words, you can't just like ACX or Findaway Voices or Publish Drive, just have an account and just go ahead and publish your audiobooks. No. They want to make sure that it's going to be a worthwhile endeavor, so there is an application process for them. I'm going to do a little bit more exploring one of these days. I actually reached out to their team some time ago and hope I can actually land an interview with them sometime soon. So here's why I am not exclusive with ACX and why I won't go exclusive with ACX. I want library distribution. It is absolutely critical to me personally to have my audiobook available through libraries. Libraries are what I go to a lot. I consume a lot of library content. I believe a lot in community libraries and I like to support them. And by making my book exclusive through ACX, I remove that option. Now, if libraries aren't a big deal to you, totally fine. But what you need to also take in consideration is ACX has actually had a little bit of mustard on their face lately based on some of their sketchy business practices. And also their fixed pricing system is just absolute trash because they're charging based on the length of your book as opposed to the value of the book. So regardless of how much you want to price your audiobook on ACX, they don't care. They're going to go ahead and price it for you. And the sketchy business practices include some of the wonky refund system, not to mention that they send out emails to buyers who just bought an audiobook and say, hey, just so you know, you could go ahead and have a refund on this. Oh, I'm getting ready to go into a rant and I'm going to save this one for next week. So make sure you stay tuned to this podcast because I'm going to go deep on ACX and Audible. But all that to say this is they've got some sketchy business practices and I'm just not going to go exclusive with them. Now, here's what we need to kind of focus on is how ACX system for publishing audiobooks doesn't exist elsewhere. You know, for example, when you go to publish through ACX, you have to have the ebook or the print book already available on Amazon. Why? Just why? That is absolutely stupid. This is dumb. What if I just want to put out an exclusive audiobook, which by the way, there are some Audible originals that don't exist in ebook and print book. But for whatever reason, since we are indie authors, we don't get the same privileges of someone like a John Cena or a Kevin Hart. Big shout out to them. There's no hate towards those guys. But either way, it just is so stupid. I should be able to publish my audiobook just like the other platforms like a Findaway Voices or a Publish Drive that I don't have to actually have an ebook or print book available in order to actually publish it. It's a silly system, not to mention there were actually some folks that were abusing that system some time ago where they were claiming rights to books that weren't theirs. Yeah, not a good system. ACX needs to ditch it. So what do I do now? What would I do now in my position? I would do it myself. I have all the equipment, so I'd rather do it myself. And yes, there's a steep learning curve, and I'm probably going to spend many a sleepless night and pulling out whatever remainder of hair there is on my head, probably my eyebrows at this point, to try to, get it all dialed in. But I figure as soon as I learn this skill, that producing audiobooks will come in due time. So that's what I'm going to end up doing. Now, as far as distribution goes, I'm still going to leverage avenues like ACX, begrudgingly, Findaway Voices, and Publish Drive. Now, the reason why I'm going to still shoot with ACX is because of the distribution to Amazon and Audible. I have to admit to you that I am reluctant in going to that avenue, but I'm literally shooting myself in the foot since there are a great amount of sales being had through Audible and Amazon. And that's really the only way to go. Sure, I can go through Findaway Voices and hit those avenues, but guess what? They're still going to take their cut. They're still going to change the pricing to what they want. I don't like it, but here we are. Now, how would I promote my audiobooks then? I recommend what I learned from Mark Leslie Lefebvre's philosophy in his book, Wide for the Win. It's called being inclusive. Inclusive means that you want to share a link that will send people options. So one of the options that I like is called Books to Read. That is actually a company that's run by Draft2 Digital. And if you go to Books to Read, it's 100% free to create a universal book link. And in the universal book links, you can actually put in links to your print books, your ebooks, and of course your audiobooks. Now the ebooks one is automatically generated, but you're going to have to hand type in the print books as well as the audiobooks. But it is nice because when you share a specific link through a QR code or even a pretty link of some sort that someone goes to your Books to Read page, then they will have those options available to them. So when I mention my audiobook and I'm promoting it, let's say inside an interview, I will send them over to my Books to Read link. I'll say, hey, if you want to get my audiobook, it's available through every major audiobook retail platform if you visit xyz.com, whatever that might be. And then they can go ahead and make that choice. It's being inclusive. It's giving everybody options. That isn't just simply Amazon. I think a lot of authors make that mistake of like, well, everybody buys from Amazon. Nope, they don't. And in some regions, some people can't buy from Amazon. So there's something to think about that. Now, as far as one of the things I really like for promotion is through Findaway Voices. They have exclusive promo deals that they do through Chirp and a number of other retailers. And so you just have to keep an eye on your inbox so you know exactly when it's coming. So don't unsubscribe to Findaway Voices if you happen to have an account, because they're going to give you some of those exclusive promos so you can take advantage of them. Hey, speaking of taking advantage, I need to take advantage of a speech therapist. Good Lord, why am I getting all choked up today? Elevate your projects with Dibbly Create, where collaboration meets AI-powered innovation. Folks, get free or premium access when you visit my affiliate link at dalelinks.com/DibblyCreate. Big shout out to the gang over at Dibbly Create. They just came up with a new summarizer tool. And I know this is completely off script, but you can take a book that has up to 500 reviews or more if you wanted to. Any number of reviews is fine, but you can take the link to a book review, plug it into the summarizer, and what it will do is it will analyze all of the pros and cons of a particular publication. What are the opportunities that are available to you? So if you want to spy on your competition, see what they're missing out on, or even improve a publication you've done in the past, that summarizer tool is, ooh, I love it. Man, big shout out to Marco and the team over at Dibbly Create. dalelinks.com/DibblyCreate. Hey, final thoughts here. Here's a few tips here, folks, and pay closest attention to this one. So I'm not mincing any words here. Avoid revenue share deals if at all possible, especially through ACX. Just don't do it. Findaway Voices is more in line with what authors need, but still you end up paying 150% of the per finished hour for a narrator, which it's steep, but sometimes drastic times call for drastic measures. Here's the thing though, folks. Don't rush the process. Sure, it'd be nice to release your audiobook at the same exact time as the ebook and print book, but don't do it at the detriment to your overall brand. Next thing is be resourceful. Use what you have right now and update the audiobook later when you can afford it. Yes, this means potentially using AI narration as a placeholder or putting out a less than perfect audiobook production. And last but not least, don't feel pressured into publishing audiobooks. While I'm bullish about audiobooks, you do not have to feel the same way. Just know that when you provide potential readers with options, you greatly increase the likelihood of them becoming a buying customer and hopefully a lifelong fan. Hey, the next episode that's going to be coming up this next week, I think you already heard me refer to it already. I'm going to be talking about the dangers of publishing on Audible by way of ACX. It's going to be probably a 20-minute rant, and you're going to find out some of the details about ACX, some of the good, the bad, and the ugly when it comes to ACX. Till later, this has been Self-Publishing with Dale, and I will see you next week.